Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Michelle Vanek. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. Michelle Ray Vanek was born on February 5, 1970, and lived in Lakewood, Colorado. As a teenager, she attended Lakewood High School, where she was a swimmer. In 1988, she had a son. In 1992, Michelle married a man named Ben, who adopted her son. She and Ben had a son together in 1995, a daughter in 1998, and another daughter in 2003. Michelle worked in accounting before quitting her job to care for her children. During the summer of 2005, 35-year-old Michelle was thinking about making some changes in her life. For example, she was considering a return to work, and she was looking for a new outdoor adventure. She decided to climb one of Colorado's 58 14ers. A 14er is a mountain with an elevation of at least 14,000 feet. A family friend named Eric Sawyer was familiar with the 14ers of Colorado, having climbed 37 of them. He told Michelle that he would help her make the climb. Eric thought that the Mount of the Holy Cross would be a good choice. This mountain, which has an elevation of 14,011 feet, is in the Holy Cross Wilderness, 6 miles from Red Cliff, Colorado. The name of the mountain comes from a snowfield on the northeast face, which is shaped like a cross. The mountain is not considered a technical climb. However, it does require a lot of stamina. There are 4 primary routes to reach the summit. The most common route is the North Ridge Trail, which involves 5,625 feet of elevation gain in a round-trip hike of 11 miles. This route is also the easiest and the one selected by Eric and Michelle. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On September 24, 2005, at 4 a.m., Michelle Vanek and Eric Sawyer departed from Lakewood, Colorado, in Michelle's Toyota Sequoia SUV. They drove to the Half Moon Campground near Minturn, Colorado, arriving at 6:30 a.m. This is a common staging area for people hiking the North Trail of Mount of the Holy Cross. At 7 a.m., they started their hike. Michelle had a headache at this time, and Eric left his water filter and his lunch in Michelle's vehicle. The hiking adventure was not off to a good start, but it quickly became much worse. Instead of getting on the North Ridge Trail as intended, Michelle and Eric took the Fall Creek Trail by mistake. This trail is a 15-mile round trip instead of 11 and approaches the summit from the southwest. It crosses 3 13ers on the way to Mount of the Holy Cross. They did not realize they were on the wrong trail until an hour and a half later. Believing that returning to the correct trail would make it impossible to summit that day, they continued up the mountain. At 1:15 p.m., Michelle ran out of water. At 1:25 p.m., they reached a point which was within a half-mile hike of the summit. The summit was only 400 vertical feet above them. Even though they were pretty close, Michelle indicated that she was too tired to make it the rest of the way. The effects of altitude sickness were profound, and of course Michelle had no water. According to Eric, Michelle told him to continue to the summit. Eric pointed to the peak of the North Ridge Trail, which was about 1,300 feet away. He told Michelle to begin her descent on that trail, and he would catch up with her after he reached the summit. They would descend the rest of the way together. At 1:42 p.m., Eric made it to the summit and called his wife to give her the news. A married couple who was also there asked him to take their photograph, which Eric did. At 1:47 p.m., he started his descent, expecting to catch up with Michelle shortly. Eric had only been at the summit for 5 minutes. To his surprise, he couldn't find Michelle on the North Ridge Trail. He asked hikers who were ascending if they had seen a woman descending, but they had not. Eric then went back up the mountain and repeatedly yelled Michelle's name. At 3:30 p.m., Eric called his wife again. He told her that Michelle was missing and asked her to call the police. The search effort that followed involved over 800 participants and was the largest search for a missing hiker in the history of Colorado. There were a few unusual discoveries during the search which captured people's attention. For example, dog handlers spotted blood in the snow, but the weather was too hostile for the dogs to track it. The searchers encountered a man who refused to talk with them, hid behind a tree, then ran down the mountain. They ran into a man camping in a yellow tent who refused to unzip the tent or to respond. and a shotgun was found in a duffel bag near the trailhead. None of these things could be connected to Michelle's disappearance, but it did lead to a lot of speculation. Ultimately, no sign of Michelle Vanek was found. 8 days into the search, it was discontinued. In the years that followed, many theories emerged about what could have happened to Michelle. Did she fall off a cliff and die somewhere where her body remained hidden? Was she murdered? Did she make it off the mountain and start a new life? Or was she abducted by aliens? All these possibilities were being entertained, and it appeared as though the mystery would never be solved. On July 5, 2021, the first clue about what happened to Michelle was discovered. A ski coach who was hiking with his son contacted the police after finding a hiking boot of the same brand Michelle had been wearing. It was on the northeast side of the mountain on a rock. The police were able to confirm that the boot belonged to Michelle, but its location was curious. It had been found on the other side of the mountain from where the majority of the searching occurred immediately after Michelle's disappearance in 2005. By the time the searchers entered that area, there was 2 feet of snow on the mountain. Prompted by the discovery of the boot, a team conducted a search of the area where it was found, but they did not find anything else. Hope for solving the mystery once again dissipated. In the fall of 2023, there was a bizarre occurrence which drastically changed the outcome of this story. A Lutheran pastor named Scott Bebe claimed that he had a remarkable dream related to Michelle's disappearance. Michelle came to him in this dream and told him that she wanted to be found by a team of women. Scott told the Vail Mountain Rescue Team about how he was contacted from beyond the grave. In response, they formed a search party comprising 6 women in October 2023. The all-female team initiated a search for Michelle's body on August 20, 2024, because there wasn't as much snow on the mountain at that time. Their initial search did not yield any results. The team returned about 3 weeks later, on September 13. This time they found several items that belonged to Michelle, including a red shirt, ski poles, blue and white mittens, a key for a Toyota Sequoia SUV, a backpack, a blue windbreaker, a digital camera, and bones. The team returned in October and found Michelle's necklace and additional bones, including a human spine. The discovery was made a half-mile from Michelle's last known position. DNA confirmed that the bones belonged to Michelle. The authorities considered the case of Michelle Vanek to be closed. The police concluded that there was no wrongdoing involved in her death. Rather, this was just a terrible accident. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. Some people involved in the search effort believe they know how Michelle met her end. Their conclusion is partially based on images recovered from her digital camera. The image timestamps allowed them to retrace her movement on the day she disappeared. So they compared the images captured on her camera with what they could see on the mountain and kind of figured things out. After Eric continued to the summit, Michelle started to descend the mountain on the North Ridge Trail. Inexplicably, she left the trail and found herself facing steep terrain. She was unable to safely ascend or descend at that point. Michelle had become trapped. Waiting for help would have been the optimal strategy, but she did something different. She attempted to maneuver out of the situation and fell off a cliff to her death. The injuries to her spine were consistent with a significant fall. This seems like a reasonable theory based on the evidence, but it still leaves one question. Why did Michelle leave the trail in the first place? It wasn't dark outside. This happened in the early afternoon. There are a few possibilities. Michelle was confused due to being exhausted and/or dehydrated. Maybe she believed that leaving the trail would get her down the mountain more quickly, so it was just her inexperience that caused the tragedy. Or Michelle left the trail to take a picture. At 2:13 p.m., when she would have been trapped on the steep terrain, she took a picture of a seam in a vertical rock face. I wonder if she found herself stuck in that position because she wanted to get that picture. People who are panicked usually don't take photographs, so I don't think she was aware of her situation before taking the picture. Only after taking the picture did she realize that she could not ascend or descend. This left Michelle feeling embarrassed. She attempted to get out of the situation on her own. This is what led to the fatal fall. Which theory best explains the outcome is anyone's guess. Maybe it was a combination of these theories. Item number 2, Michelle's final moments don't tell the whole story. It's also important to understand what led up to her predicament. Several unfortunate circumstances, including some mistakes, contributed to Michelle's death. For example, she was inexperienced at climbing mountains. She did not have the required stamina. Before even starting to ascend, Michelle had a headache. Eric forgot his water filter and his lunch. The map that Eric was using had been photocopied from a guidebook about the Colorado 14ers. He did not have a GPS, a compass, or a topographic map. Michelle and Eric ended up on the wrong trail, perhaps due to some construction in the area, which made it difficult to identify the trails. If they had selected the correct trail, they would have made it to the summit based on the distance they covered. Just short of the summit, Michelle and Eric separated. This was a critical error. Furthermore, Eric made a critical error when he directed Michelle to begin the descent without him. If they insisted on separating, which was a terrible idea, Michelle should have at least stayed in one place. A lot more can go wrong with her moving down the trail. Item number 3. A curious element of this case is how a bizarre dream led to Michelle's remains being found on Mount of the Holy Cross. It's not every day that one hears about a missing person invading a dream and making a gender-specific demand about the searchers who will find her. This is the only time I've ever heard of this scenario. It is pretty strange. The pastor may have had a dream featuring a person who looked like Michelle giving him a special message, but it is impossible to believe that this was actually Michelle. If she was really interested in an all-female mission to recover her body, why not invade the dream of one of the women on the search team? That would have been a lot more expedient. Are there technical aspects to dream invasion that would preclude this? Can only certain people host dream invaders? There are so many unanswered questions here. Some people look at the outcome of this case and say, well, in 2005, the male searchers did not find Michelle, even though there were hundreds of them. In 2024, 6 women managed to find her. This must mean that the dream story is true. They cite ideas like female intuition to support this claim, asserting that Michelle knew the intuition would make a difference. She realized that only women would be able to find her remains. Supporters of the dream theory also wonder if Michelle had a special connection with the women, which allowed her to guide them to her remains. The dream theory is certainly interesting, but there is another less fantastical explanation. The all-female team in 2024 deliberately searched areas that had not been searched by the original team. It is possible that the communication style of the women was more helpful than the style used by the men, and maybe that made a difference. Whether it did or didn't, Michelle didn't come back from the grave to pick the gender of the team members. If she did, that would paint a pretty depressing picture of how people spend their time in the afterlife. Did Michelle really have nothing better to do than worry about the gender of people searching for her body? The ludicrous nature of the dream theory does not render this case ordinary by any means. It is still strange in the sense that the interpretation of a dream led to the recovery of remains. Often when people act on dreams, nothing special happens. They may even regret it. In this case, there was a rare positive result. Even so, the lesson learned in this case is not the importance of acting on dreams, rather something much more familiar when it comes to stories about people disappearing on mountains. This case emphasizes the importance of being prepared. If Michelle and Eric had been properly prepared for their hike, there would have been no need for a recovery mission, dream-inspired or otherwise. Those are my thoughts in the case of Michelle Vanek. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.